as a Jewish believer in Jesus, it cost me plenty. It cost me my family. My father, who was an Orthodox Jew, was very ashamed of the fact that I was a believer in Jesus. And I had to count the cost. And I did count the cost. But one day, my father said to me, "Tell me why your Jesus is the Messiah." I've been waiting a long time for him to say that to me. And I pulled out my Bible, and I started reading from the 53rd chapter of Isaiah. And the minute I started, he said, "Stop. Show me the Bible you're reading from." So I gave him my King James Bible, and he said, "Aha, that doesn't count. That's a Christian Bible." So I said, "I will get a Jewish Bible because they're the same, but I'll get a Jewish Bible." So I went to my Orthodox Jewish rabbi that bar mitzvahed me, and I said, "Rabbi, can I have a Tanakh that's an approved Jewish scriptures?" And he didn't quite understand because he knew about my belief in Jesus as the Messiah, but he gave it to me. And I said, "By the way, Rabbi, would you inscribe something in it for me?" And so he did, Rabbi Boteach. And this is the Orthodox rabbi. And this is Jewish Publication Society approved scriptures. So I went back to my father and I said, "Dad, I have a Tanakh from our rabbi, which is," and this is the actual one, right, that was inscribed by the rabbi. And I started reading the 53rd chapter of Isaiah. And we've been referring to that a lot tonight. And this is leading to my last question. So I would like to read to you what I read to my Orthodox Jewish father from the 53rd chapter of Isaiah, written 800 or more years before Jesus came to earth. This is what I read for him. And I'll start just a little bit before the 53rd chapter, so you'll get it in context. "Behold, my servant shall prosper. He shall be exalted and lifted up, and shall be very high. According as many were appalled at thee, so marred was his visage," or his appearance, "unlike that of a man, and his form unlike that of the sons of men. So shall he startle many nations. Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. For that which had not been told them shall they see, and that which they had not heard shall they perceive." What is it that they wasn't told them? What is it that they didn't even perceive? This is Isaiah 53. "Who would believe our report?" Our meaning the prophet's report. Who's going to believe what the prophets are saying? "To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" That's part of God. Who is the arm of the Lord revealed? "For he shot up right forth as a sapling and as a root out of dry ground," alluding to his miraculous birth. "He'll have no form nor comeliness that we Jewish people should even look upon him, nor beauty that we should even delight in him. He's going to be despised and forsaken of men, a man of pain and acquainted with disease." This might surprise you, because in the Hebrew, this is actually a very good translation. "And as one from whom men hide their face, he was despised, and we Jewish people esteemed him not. Surely our diseases he did bear, and our pains he carried. Whereas we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted, but he was actually wounded because of our transgressions. He was actually crushed because of our iniquities. The chastisement of our welfare was upon him, and with his stripes we were healed. All we like sheep went astray. We turned everyone to our own ways. And the Lord has made to light on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, though he humbled himself, and opened not his mouth, as a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and as a sheep that before her shearers is dumb. Yea, he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and with his generation who did reason? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. And here's the answer: for the transgressions of my people, to whom the stroke was really due. And my father said, stop! You're reading about Jesus. So when anyone says to me that this is not Jesus, you can't say that to me anymore. Because if my Orthodox Jewish father, who the last thing in the world wanted to believe was Jesus was the Messiah, says that Isaiah 53 was talking about Jesus, that's good enough for me. Amen. But then he said, stop, I don't want to hear anymore. And a few years later, he was dying in the hospital. And something happened to me that happened to me only once in my life. When I was a Jew lost in the New Age, an encounter with evil, not wanting to even live, wanting to die. I never wanted to die. I couldn't even think about death. But life got too hard for me. And everyone has their point. And I reached my point. And I said, I give up. But my Christian friends said, if you'll pray to God in the name of the Jewish Messiah, Jesus, he'll set you free. And I did. And when I woke up the next morning, I went to bed not wanting to live. Life was too hard. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. Life was just too hard for me. I reached my point. But when I woke up, my room was filled with the presence of the Shekinah glory of God. The same glory of God that rose Messiah Yeshua from the dead. And I knew, I had an internal knowing that Yeshua was the Messiah. Then a few years later, I felt the Shekinah glory again. For 7 days and 7 nights. I didn't know why. Wherever I went, the presence of God was on me, in me, all around me. It was the most wonderful experience I ever had in my life. I've never been on drugs. I've never been an alcoholic. I can't compare what that is like, but I know that that's nothing compared to the Shekinah glory of the living God. And I didn't know why that was happening. And then I got the phone call from the hospital. Your father is dying. And when I went, I can tell you before God and man, I didn't say anything convincing to my father, but I carried the presence of God into the intensive care room. And when I walked in, my sister was there, who is a Jewish believer in the Messiah, who lives in Israel now, and we said, Dad, Mom said heaven must be a wonderful place. She knew the Messiah. Would you like to know the Messiah too? My father had lost his voice. His whole body was dying and shutting down. But he said with an audible voice, yes. I tell you, the reason he said yes was not my persuasiveness. I tell you, the reason he said yes, because the Shekinah glory of the living God came upon him. So my last question of the night, 2 minutes, and you can say anything you want for the 2 minutes, not even answer my question. Fair? Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, why does Isaiah 53 not speak of Jesus?
First of all, that was a very moving story, and I hope that your father's memory is an eternal blessing and inspiration to you.
It is. I actually went to and said Kaddish for the year at the Orthodox synagogue. And even the rabbi's son made the statement that I was a real mensch because of that. But go ahead.
When I hear a story like that, what moves me, and I see tears in many of your eyes, is not that someone, a Jew, who hears a single chapter of Isaiah is suddenly drawn to a belief in Jesus. But for me, it's the story of a nation that held on to their belief in the God of Israel, who fought against the Romans, who suffered under the Nazis, who were kicked out and expelled from Spain, who held on tenaciously to the faith of Abraham and the faith of Moses, that is clear that no man is God, and that every human being must lead a godly life, and to be separated from that religion through a single reading of a passage without asking a single question? My God, you mean it's that easy? You mean my people didn't give this up even when they were tortured and killed for it? And a single reading of a passage, he was separated from the faith of his forefathers, from the faith of Abraham? When you ask me about Isaiah 53, and I just wrote Kosher Jesus because the Jewish community should reclaim a patriot who died for his people against the tyranny and the oppression of Rome. But when I read Isaiah 53, it can't be Jesus for the reason you just said. I'm surprised your father didn't catch it, Sid. Like a lamb to the slaughter, he opened not his mouth. Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's in Matthew and in Mark. He also says it is done. He opens his mouth. It also says, he shall see a seed. He shall prolong his days. Jesus had no seed, he had no children, and he died at about 33. I think this is speaking about Abraham Lincoln. I think it's speaking about Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was the greatest American of the 20th century. Is there anyone who suffered the iniquity of the American people more than him? And he did see his seed. He suffered the racism of Americans and a white racist who put a bullet through his neck. Why isn't it Martin Luther? The point is, many people have suffered. But I want to tell you one thing. You can have all the most moving stories on earth about someone who embraces Jesus as a Jew through some epiphany and through some miraculous intervention. But you will never, ever hear that about me. It will never happen. I keep the religion of Jesus. It's called Judaism. We worship the one true, infinite, indivisible God. He is not three, he is one. I worship the one true God, and I am part of an eternal people who fought the oppression of so many others to stamp out our faith, and not a single moving story will end it, and not tears from an audience will end it. We will live as Jews, we will die as Jews. It is time for Mike Brown and for Sid to come back to their people. It's not just about having a kotel made of styrofoam in North Carolina.
You're a minute
it's about the real.
It's 3 minutes, Rabbi.
It's about a wall of tears that Jews, and they've shed a lot, but not one would ever separate them from their people. It's time to come back to Judaism. It is time for my Christian brothers and sisters to learn about the religion of Jesus, Judaism, to enrich your Christian faith. I thank you for your friendship with the Jewish people. It is something that we appreciate. It is something that we glory in, and I hope that we will be much closer, deeper brothers. Not through us becoming what you want us to be, but through Christians also respecting us for who we are. Thank you.
Dr. Brown, would you respond? And then we're going to open it up to questions and answers.
Before I explain why Isaiah 53 has to be referring to Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah, let me say that the depth of solidarity that I feel towards my people, the fact that I identify as a Jew and identify with my people Israel, and the whole night feel this constant tug in my heart out of love for Shmuley, which he understands, is because of Jesus, Yeshua. I probably would not have lived to be 18 years old with the profligate life I was living. And it's an interesting thing about epiphanies, God appearing, God speaking. You know, it's easy to say I wouldn't change if it happened because it never happened to you. It's an interesting thing that in the 18th chapter, 1 Kings, when the whole nation was bordering on the verge of apostasy, and Elijah said, are you going to serve God or are you going to serve a false god, Baal? And the people don't answer. When the fire falls from heaven, they all fall on their faces and say the Lord is God. It's interesting that when God spoke on Mount Sinai, He didn't just come with reason and argument. He came thundering to the nation. And when they saw the power of God, they said, okay, whatever he says, we will do. There's even a Talmudic tradition that says that all of Mount Sinai was picked up and hung over them in flames. And God said, you're going to do it? Yeah, we'll do it. So this idea that it's just, rational argument alone is flawed. Throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, God is revealed and yet he's hidden. Right after Mount Sinai, it says they saw the God of Israel. 74 people. In Exodus, the 24th chapter, they saw the God of Israel. And yet, if you see him, you die. How did that happen? Because God, through his Son, makes himself known to us. He is complex in his unity. That's why Judaism calls him the Ein Sof. And a fascinating thing, I have so many of my friends now, they live in Israel. Their kids serve in the IDF. Why? Because of faith in Yeshua. They were completely lost to their people. What has drawn them back to their people, what has drawn them to love Shabbat, for example, and love the holy days of Israel, is faith in Yeshua. What's happened is the church went all the way over here and preached this very Gentile, European, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Jesus. And Rabbi Shmuley is saying he's really Jewish. Step in the right direction. You just have to keep going, find out who he really is. So very briefly, Isaiah 53 cannot refer to the nation of Israel as a whole, because if the nation of Israel as a whole was righteous, they would not be suffering that. They would be the head and not the tail. You say, well, it's the righteous remnant that suffered. The problem is it says, Uvachavrato nir palanu. And at the cost of his wounds, there's healing for us. Martin Luther King suffered terribly, and others have suffered assassination, these things, but they were not perfectly righteous themselves, number one, and their suffering did not bring healing to those that have looked to God. The transformation happens in accordance with what's written. I encourage you, read the context. Read Isaiah starting in the 41st chapter, and you'll see the servant of the Lord is sometimes plural, sometimes singular. But from the 48th chapter on, the middle of the 48th chapter on, he's always singular. He's a specific individual. He's one. And Shmuley, it's not just some epiphany. It's when you look at the words and your eyes are open, there it is, a written text. Jews want a written text. There it is, a written text. And when our heart and mind is open, realize he's the one. The very thing the prophet said, we thought he was suffering for his own sins. We didn't get it. Now we realize he was suffering for our sins. When that revelation comes, it is life-changing. It's costly. But I believe you have enough courage and determination to do the right thing that when the revelation comes, you'll do it. I believe that.
Okay. We're going to have questions now. If you have a question, raise your hand, and Ryan will bring a microphone to you. Please keep your hand up. I'm almost reminded of the scripture. In fact, I am. King David said, lift holy hands to God. I hope they're holy if your hands are up. Okay. Ryan, do we have our first question? And if you want to address it to both or one, feel free.
It's directed to Dr. Brown to answer the question about the crying out, the seed, and the long life.
Surely. I didn't want to go beyond my time limit. So when it says he went as a lamb to the slaughter, kaseh lifnei gozezeha, it's talking about not resisting death. It's talking about not resisting punishment. And that shocked everyone, that he didn't fight, that he didn't argue, that he was just as a lamb before his accusers. That's what it's speaking of. It's not saying when he's hanging on the cross that he can't open his mouth at all. When it says he'll see seed, the word zerah is normally used of physical seed. Sometimes it's used of a spiritual posterity. It can be used in different ways. So we could be there are many different ways to look at it. Seeing seed, it's the only time that expression is ever used in the entire Hebrew Scripture, seeing seed. So it could well be speaking of just future believers. It could be future disciples. All of us could be part of that seed. So it can go on without it being physical progeny. There's no problem with that, of course.
Once you make the verses that elastic, then you can take anything in the Bible and make it apply to Jesus. It says twice he did not open his mouth. The first time, verse 7, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Then it says it again, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. It is absolutely clear. It says it twice. Whoever this is discussing is someone that did not open their mouth. Doesn't say they were led willingly, doesn't say they capitulated, doesn't say they surrendered. It said twice they did not open their mouth. And had I been sitting there with Sid and his father, as his father gave up a religion of 3,000 years, I would have said to his father, this is all very moving, but with all due respect, it cannot in any way whatsoever apply to Jesus Christ. It can apply to Martin Luther King, who was cut off on a balcony in the Lorraine Motel, and he said absolutely nothing. It could apply to Abraham Lincoln, who took a bullet to the head at Ford's Theater. He said absolutely nothing. He was unconscious from the moment he took a bullet to the head until he died at 7:02, I believe it was, or something like that, the following morning at the Peterson House, if I'm getting that correct as well. It would apply, and the iniquity they suffered for their people would also apply. And those are just two people that we know of. There are countless millions who have suffered, to whom this could apply as well, who went, the one person it cannot refer to at all whatsoever is Jesus, because it says he didn't open his mouth. He will see his seed, which means his children. It does not mean students. Seed are his children, his seed. And finally it says he will prolong his days. Jesus died at 33.
And he died, rose from the dead, prolonged his days. By the way, Jeremiah uses the exact same expression in Jeremiah, the 11th chapter, saying that he was like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter. He was constantly opening his mouth. The image is of non-resistance. And again, before his accusers, he never speaks. And those that say it applies to the Jewish people, we've opened our mouths through history. It has to do with passivity when being brought to death. That's the image there.